engine cut out, leaving only the sound of the Caribbean Sea lapping against the rotting wood of the Chacachacare jetty. Jelani stepped onto the salt-cracked pier, his camera rig balanced on his shoulder. Beside him, Mikhail checked his watch, the moonlight catching the cynical smirk on his face. 10-page M, Mikhail muttered. The perfect time for a viral debunking. By morning, everyone will see this island is just old stone and bad memories. Jelani didn't answer. He was looking up toward the peak of Mount Pleasant, where the house sat like a jagged tooth against the stars. They trekked through the dense, humid brush of the island, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying hibiscus. When the house finally loomed out of the shadows, it was more imposing than the rumors suggested. Sola caught up to Jelani at the threshold, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the sensors on her thermal imaging tablet. The battery is draining way too fast, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the chirping of the cicadas. Jelani nodded, his eyes fixed on the gaping, windowless frames of the upper floor. Inside, the air was unnaturally still. Mikhail led the way into the grand foyer, his flashlight beam cutting through a decade of dust. See? Nothing but dry rot and bat droppings, he called back to Sola, who was trailing behind with a directional microphone. He kicked a pile of debris, the sound echoing through the hollow shell of the building. Sola didn't laugh. She stopped moving, her headphones pressed tight against her ears. She signaled for silence, her eyes wide as she stared into the darkness of the hallway. Jelani moved toward the back of the house, where the stone gave way to a cramped, windowless cellar. Mikhail followed him down the narrow stairs, his skepticism finally beginning to waver as the temperature plummeted. In the corner of the room, bolted directly into the foundation, Jelani's flashlight revealed a heavy, rusted iron ring. Attached to it was a length of chain, the links worn smooth by centuries of friction. This wasn't just a house, Mikhail, Jelani whispered, filming the cold metal. This was a cage. High above them, Ixola screamed. Mikhail and Zola collided in the narrow staircase as she scrambled down, her equipment clattering against the stone. The audio, she gasped, clutching Mikhail's arm for support. It's not just white noise. There are voices, Mikhail. They're crying out for water. Mikhail grabbed the headphones, his face turning pale as he listened. The rhythmic clanking of chains began to manifest not through the electronics, but from the very floorboards beneath their feet. Jelani ignored the urge to run, his lens focused on a sudden shimmer in the air near the cellar door. Sola moved toward him, her thermal tablet glowing a violent, icy blue. Something is manifesting, she breathed. A dark shape began to coalesce in the center of the room, a shadow darker than the night around them. It wasn't a blur or a trick of the light. It was the distinct silhouette of a person, head bowed, shoulders shaking with a silent, eternal sob. Mikhail grabbed Jelani's shoulder, trying to pull him back toward the exit. We've seen enough, Jelani. Let's go, he hissed. But the door didn't lead to the hallway anymore. The air grew heavy with the smell of wood smoke and old sorrow. The walls seemed to pulse, the modern ruins flickering away to reveal the house as it was, a site of hidden, agonizing history. Jelani stood his ground, his camera still rolling, recording the truth they had come to dismiss. The shadow solidified into the form of a woman. She wore a tattered homespun dress, her eyes hollow and filled with a grief that spanned centuries. She didn't look at the camera. She looked through Jelani, her translucent hand reaching out toward the iron ring on the wall. Jelani froze as a phantom chill surged through him. He realized she wasn't there to scare them. She was trapped in a loop of her final moments, forever reaching for a family that had been taken from her in the dark. Boat! We have to get to the boat, Kula yelled, grabbing Mikhail's hand as the cellar began to vibrate with a low, mournful hum. The voices were no longer whispers. They were a chorus of names being called out in the dark. Mikhail didn't argue this time. They sprinted through the flickering ruins, the walls bleeding shadows that reached for them with spectral fingers. They burst through the front doors, the humid night air of Chacachacare feeling like a blessing. As the boat sped away from the island, Jelani sat in the stern, clutching the memory card from his camera. Sola sat beside him, wrapped in a thin jacket, staring at the receding silhouette of Mount Pleasant. The debunking was forgotten. They had gone looking for ghosts to prove they didn't exist, only to find a history that refused to be silenced. Jelani looked at the screen of his camera one last time. The image was nothing but static, except for a single clear frame of a hand reaching for freedom.